I grew up on the Cape Flats. Those communities have been deprived of anything that even feels like hope. And I was very fortunate. I had parents who actually didn't finish high school themselves, but somehow understood that education would be part of our liberation. And I went to a school in Deep River called South Peninsula High. I thankfully got to matric in 1979. Two teachers sat me down and they said, you know what? We believe that you have potential to do much, much more than you think is possible. And the message I think I like to give people when I talk about this is that each one of us has amazing talent, has potential, has magic within us that often is never unleashed because, again, it comes back to fear, what my people think. What are these teachers asking me to actually go and do? And so I said to them, what do you want me to do? Go home and have a conversation about university today with your parents, and we're going to help you to fill in the forms and apply for scholarships tomorrow when you come back. And if they didn't have that conversation with me, then I would never ever have thought about university. So the point is that a 5-minute conversation like this can make a difference to a person's life forever. And so, of course, I went back and we filled in the forms, and I got into the University of the Western Cape. And I was a first-year student in 1980, and there was a massive educational uprising, which was part of our democratic processes in South Africa. And so before I knew it, the university was closed down. There were no more classes because there was so much unrest. So I had to cancel my registration. I cancelled my bursary, and I went to do some interviews for some potential jobs. And I did not land a job. I decided to go back to the university just before the end of that academic year, and I chose to do teaching, but I saw it as a stepping stone. And it was a funny thing at the time because here I am embarking into a whole new world that I didn't know existed, and I'm already thinking about a first step, like there might even be a second or a third, So it just shows that sometimes one little success can breed many other little successes, and that we really shouldn't give up on ourselves. And so, of course, my first job as an English teacher at a school called Grondplek Secondary in Lansdowne. I continued to study in education. I did a B.Ed honours while I was at UNISA. I figured, well, if I can finish one degree, I may as well keep going. It is so important to continue to learn because the world is changing at pace, and what we know today might not be relevant tomorrow. So you've got to stay on top of your game. And then I went to the University of the Western Cape. I was there for 10 years as a lecturer in teacher education, the education faculty. And while I was there, I thought, well, we may as well do the next thing. So I did a master's in education while I was working there. And then something very interesting happened also in that same year of 1988. I met Kevin, and his mother clipped out a little thing from the newspaper. She still clips things from the newspaper for me. So this particular one said Harvard South Africa Fellowship open for application. And so, of course, I applied. And I decided to do a second master's there. So I went. I had a supervisor, an amazing person. He just kept saying to me, you must get into the doctoral program. I was I need to go home. I left Kevin at home for 1 whole year. Kevin and I got married in 92, and I came home and I said to him, Kevin, I would like you to go with me to do my doctorate at Harvard. And he came with me on this journey into the unknown. Bear in mind, I did not have a scholarship for the doctorate. I was working 2 or 3 jobs, and I still wasn't making ends meet. I had to do the walk of shame to the financial aid office and say, you know what, I can't pay. And she said, well, if you're going to continue to perform in this way, we're going to assist you with your tuition, but it's not for free. You're going to come here every 6 months, and we're going to talk about your performance. And I graduated in 97 with my doctorate. So we came back here with our little boy. We came back here with my doctorate, and the plan was to go and work at the education department. And I was very, very disappointed to not land a job in the education department. But I want to say to people, one door closed and a very much bigger door opened. And I had to present myself for another interview not too long after at a company called Southern Life for a training manager job. And that opened up a whole door into HR. And then, of course, I went on and held some very senior jobs in South African Revenue Services, in Nedbank, in Standard Bank, in Woolworths. And I hadn't done any studies in human resource management. All I had was my degrees in education that helped me to have the building blocks to be able to cut across into a whole nother career. And that brings us right up to the present, where I'm now serving as an independent non-executive director on several boards. But I do want to pause for a second and say that was all amazing, but life does toss us adversity and curveballs. And today I also want to share with you something deeply personal. So in 2003, we were living in Pretoria. We used to come up and down to Cape Town for all sorts of events. And we came down here for a holiday. And we were leaving on the 3rd of January 2003 at about 1:30 on a Friday afternoon, just after such a lovely holiday, and going past, we were on the N2, just going past Cape Town International Airport, and somebody knocked us from behind and our vehicle rolled, and we lost our only child in that car accident. He was 7 years old at the time. If he was alive today, his birthday's on the 24th of May, and he would be 26. So it was devastating for us. And I just want to say to everybody here today, we all have a story. We all often don't go and do the necessary healing and grieving. We think we're superhuman, and somehow we can just get up and go back to work and carry on. We need to take a lot more care of ourselves and be mindful of what we are going through and be more supportive and caring of people. There's a whole body of research emerging around the future is human, and the whole concept of building humane, inclusive culture and dismantling oppressive spaces in the workplace, and what kind of work practices do we need to put in place, what kind of technology do we need to harness to ensure that we can sustain our business, how do we upskill and reskill our talent to make sure that we stay relevant in the current circumstances, how do we create safe and secure environments both at home and at work for those who still have to come to work, and how do we care more about our people who suffered personal loss, have had to work in environments that were not conducive to remote work, had to continue to perform at the levels that we would expect all people to perform. And we need leaders who are empathetic and compassionate. I think there's nothing worse for a human being than not being heard and not feeling that you belong somewhere and you're not included in things. For women as well, when it comes to race, gender dynamics, we want to be allies for all women, and we need to understand those systemic barriers and be advocates and influencing and shaping the narrative of how we're going to take this forward, because sometimes we ourselves can be the oppressors in the spaces and we step on other women in the process. And I think there's a lot of power in mindset shifts, because mindsets are connected to deeply inherent values, and those values inform our thinking, our behaviors, our ideologies, and it helps us to understand what is ethical and what is not. We often talk about the business case for diversity, and we have a whole huge regulatory environment where we're required to tick boxes and get numbers. You can get your numbers, but you can still be completely untransformed because you haven't created inclusion, and people don't feel welcome, they don't feel like they belong, they don't feel like they can progress, and this humanness isn't there. So I think that we need to understand that patriarchy runs deep, but we need to say, how do we unlock all human potential, and what is the purpose of business in society? It can't just be about profitability. It has to be about our environment, our sustainability as human beings, and deeply understand our own conscious and unconscious biases in all of this. So I think that for as men and women think about, in the spirit of the Constitution, how do we build a better life for all and not lose sight of that? We became so focused on profitability and greed that we're really not living in service of other people and of our world. And I think that we need to really start co-creating a better life, if not for ourselves, and for our children and their children to come. We find that cohesion, we find that co-creation, we find that synergistic way of living with each other, and we augment each other and we complement each other, but in the spirit of growth and this better world concept, if we can find a way to cross those bridges, to heal the hurt and the pain from the past, and find a way to support each other and embrace each other with all our flaws and vulnerabilities, I believe we would have come a long way. Yes, we know women are still being paid less than men. We know that we are being given less resources and opportunities, and there's still a lot of discrimination that goes on. Let's not try to sweep that under the carpet. But I do believe that we can address the barriers, and there's a tremendous amount of work for us to do to begin healing and moving ourselves forward, because we recognize that where we are now is not healthy, and it's what kind of society do we want to build, what kind of purpose do we want to have in this world. And so I realized that every single minute in this life counts. Time is finite. But what you can do is to use every moment to make a difference.